Let's build the open infrastructure economy. That was the message on the main keynote to OpenStack community at the summit in Vancouver this week. Mark, let's build the open infrastructure economy. What do we mean by open infrastructure? Because it's undoubtedly been the theme of the week here.
Yes, I mean, I think really what we're talking about is just a whole plethora of new ways in which people can build and operate infrastructure using open source tools. And you know, one of the things I talked about on Monday is that it's not just the open source, that's a huge part of it, that's an enabler, but there's other things that need to be done in order for it to work. But ultimately it's about sort of giving people more choices of how they build and operate their infrastructure in ways that kind of empower the operator and sort of not necessarily lock them into different tools providers or different public cloud providers. And especially in telecom, I mean, the traditional public cloud providers just aren't applicable for what they want to do to modernize their network. So they need to build and operate their own infrastructure, and having open alternatives is like extremely compelling for the telecom world.
Now, you were also saying in the keynote that you want to bust the myth that cloud is consolidating, rather cloud is actually diversifying.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think 10 years ago or so, and cloud sort of getting started, getting traction, the basic concept that everybody kind of wrapped their head around was, okay, we get it. It's going to be the lowest common denominator, the slowest chips that you can buy because they're really cheap, the old hard drives, and it's horizontal. And it's just one big massive, you string together a whole bunch of these cheap white box computers. It's commodity hardware, and you just scale out horizontally, and that's cloud. And everyone sort of said, okay, I can see how that's going to be very disruptive. This is going to change the industry. So that all happened, but then what happened now we're at this point where people are so reliant on cloud, basically automated infrastructure, and the workloads are so demanding that it actually makes sense to go the other way, which is more specialized chips, more specialized storage, more high performance networking options, and that's kind of diversifying on the hardware side. And then on the software side, some of the things you can do with infrastructure like AI, machine learning, it turns out that those problems are so hard to solve that people actually need open source to solve them. And so that we have this diversification of different tools that people are bringing together. So the actual reality has turned, it's just everything in tech, it sort of the pendulum swings both ways. But right now we're looking at things actually diversifying GPUs. So it's always a fun thing to keep you on your toes in this industry.
Have you been somewhat surprised by how much telcos have embraced OpenStack?
I would say that if you go back to the beginning of OpenStack, when we started the project, and if you told me, okay, millions of people's phone calls on AT&T will be routed through a network running on OpenStack, I would be completely floored. So in that sense, completely surprised. But now that it's a little easier in retrospect to see why. That sort of seems obvious now, but at the time, yeah, we were very surprised. But basically, it's fundamentally we think about these different verticals and different use cases, but really it's processing, storing, and moving data. That's what all this is about. And if you think about how networks are transforming through software to go from to 4G and now 5G, it's processing, storing, and moving data. So in retrospect, it's sort of like, okay, I can see totally why OpenStack is a fit there, but it definitely surprised us when it started out.
Now, when the telcos transform their networks and they're moving their bits around, we come to this fascinating place called the edge, wherever that is exactly. How will OpenStack play in edge environments?
It's a great question. That's another one that I would say is a more recent surprise. Probably it's been 5 years since we kind of were surprised by telecom, but now in the last year, edge has really just come on like a freight train. I mean, we saw a year ago, Beth Cohen from Verizon got up and said not just like, hey, OpenStack can work at the edge, but here's a box, here's OpenStack in a box, we're running it. So, honestly, it's the nice thing about open source is sometimes you not only find out about an idea, but you find out it's already been implemented for the first time, because you just don't know what people are doing with this, because they can do whatever they want with it. And then you find these amazing innovations. And that opened a lot of people's eyes a year ago. So for the past year, we put together an edge working group, representatives from all the major telcos, a lot of different vendors, and just open source enthusiasts have gotten involved. And so OpenStack is definitely has a role at the edge, and whatever the missing pieces are, that's kind of been the first the first wave is like, let's define what we mean by edge. Let's see where the existing tools, OpenStack and other, fit or don't fit. Where are the gaps? And then if need be, let's create some new technology to fill in the gaps. So that's kind of the process we've been going through. It's not at the end yet, but we're definitely seeing edge as a huge trend for open infrastructure, and OpenStack gets to come along for that ride as well.
Now you're wearing some vintage swag here. You can't help but notice.
Yes.
Vintage is a relative term because OpenStack has only been in existence for a relatively short space of time.
Yes, yes.
But what next? Where is this movement going? Because it's an incredibly strong community you've got here. Where does a foundation kind of help direct and move the industry?
Great question. Well, this particular shirt was when we first said the slogan, I fight for the users. And just kind of wanted, that was, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, something like that. And we said, if you look at a platform ecosystem, you have 3 forces you need to have strong and in alignment to work. You need to have users, you need to have an ecosystem of companies around it making money, making products, and developers. And a lot of platforms get like 2 out of 3 right, and that's why they fall down. So we identified early on, like, we've got to have users actively involved. So I got off on a tangent about the t-shirt, but you were asking where we're going from here. I mean, I think that in terms of the conference and the community, it's really about solving problems. And I think it's one of the things we've tried to do a little differently this summit is, instead of the typical conference, tech conference, you get up and people say, look at what I already built, look at how great it is, buy it right now. And it's all about the hype of what's built. And our community is about solving problems, which is like an action and not like an end. And so we're trying to say, like, what are the areas where open infrastructure, there's a huge opportunity, trillion-dollar markets that we can be in, whether it's edge and of course data centers and other places. So we're saying, okay, if that's the end goal, let's think about what the requirements are, and let's use this conference to bring together smart people from all over the world. We have people from over 50 countries here, hundreds of companies, and that's how you solve problems is, the smartest people are never going to be in one company. It just doesn't work that way. I think that a famous quote from the guy at Sun, that there are always going to be more smart people outside of your company than inside. It's nothing that you can do about that, but open source is what you can do about it. So I think it's about solving problems. I do think edge is a huge thing. And I would also say, if you want to look sort of beyond that, AI is obviously a hot trend, but what's interesting to me is it's not really distinct. AI is going to be very relevant at the edge. Some people think AI must mean like data center, huge, massive processing. But actually, like, a big part of why edge is important is that the data coming in is there's too much of it to transfer all the way up to a big data center. You need to be smart about it, store it, process it, make decisions on it at the edge. So if you use like CERN, for example, Large Hadron Collider, they talked about how they get a petabyte a second of data off of the collider. They have to throw away like 95% of that and just pick the most valuable pieces because it's not physically possible to store it all. So deciding what to throw away, what to keep, that's where things like machine learning, AI, those insights come in. So I think AI is going to be relevant at the edge and the data center, and that's kind of a cool new trend we'll probably be seeing the next year or so.
Mark, great talking to you. Thanks for joining us on TelecomTV.
Thank you. Happy to be here.